Hey Internet, it's RJ. Welcome back. Thanks for tuning into the show today. Now, today's episode, we're talking about the credit card's long-lost cousin, and that is the debit card, right? It's one of those age-old questions in the game of credit and finance. You know, if you already have a debit card, why don't you just use that over the credit card? Well, that's exactly what we're going to answer today by talking about, how debit cards work, the types of debit cards, some pros, some cons. And of course, the resurgence we've seen in debit cards as of late is there are some that earn rewards these days, so we'll cover those as well. So, of course, if that sounds interesting to you, then go ahead, press the subscribe button, and let's get to work. So to lead off with this one, if you put up a debit card and a credit card example from the same issuer, large part, you can't really tell the difference. Yes, one says debit in small print, the other might say, the name of the credit card or something like that. But besides that, they're the exact same payment network. You flip it over, a magnetic stripe on the back, chip, card number, that whole thing. So what's the exact difference here? Well, luckily, it's in the name of the product, right? So a credit card, again, it's in the name. It's a credit product, so it's tied to a revolving line of credit. So, if you have a $1,000 credit limit, you make a purchase of $100. Now you're going to have $900 of available credit limit, and you're going to owe that card issuer $100. When you get approved, they're going to do a hard pull on your credit to make sure you're not going to run away with your money. Things like that. Now, debit card, again, it's almost the exact opposite because it's instead of having a credit, it's debiting the money directly from, an account, usually a checking account. It can be personal checking or business checking account. They have both. It's debiting the money right from your account at the time of purchase as opposed to pulling down from a credit line like the credit card. But again, they function the exact same. You're going to either insert your card like you would a credit card. Now, the only real difference here is that, most debit cards now, you insert them like you normally would at the payment terminal, but there's also a PIN number associated to it. It's an extra layer of security. Arguably, credit cards should have a PIN number as well, but that's kind of a debate for another day. So overall, that's how they work. Now again, a debit card is usually an extension of a checking account. You can see some savings accounts with debit cards, but more often than not, the issuer's taking the stance of, hey, this is a savings account, you're supposed to leave the money here. So most issuers will simply throw in a debit card when you sign up for the checking account. Some will ask you, if you want to include one or not. And of course, you can also use the debit card, to go to the ATM and withdraw cash directly from your account. Again, credit cards, you can technically withdraw cash, but that's more of a cash advance because, again, it's not your money, it's part of the credit limit, so you want to stay away from that. So overall, that's the high-level versions of it. So we're going to do some pros and cons between the two because, again, right now, they sound fairly similar, and again, debt and credit usually gets a bad rap, at least, in the wider range of society, maybe people who don't find themselves in this corner of YouTube. But first, we need to talk about the different types of debit cards that there are out there that you might encounter. So we have basically three types. So first one is your standard debit card. This one is going to be your Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Chase debit card. I'm sure we all have at least one. Now this is going to debit money, just like we said, directly from your checking account at the time of purchase. Now the next one you have is electronic benefits transfer, EBT card. So this is issued by state or federal agencies for cardholders to use the benefits associated to the card. We probably won't talk about those here too much, but you could encounter them. And then the third one you're probably very familiar with if you play this game of credit card points very aggressively, and that is prepaid debit cards. So with prepaid debit cards, you could think of them like those Visa reloads that you might buy at the grocery store or the gas station, right? The funds are basically preloaded onto that card. It's not tied to a bank account or anything like that. Basically, when you're checking out and you're paying the grocery store, they're putting those funds directly onto the card. So those are going to be your three different types of debit cards. Now, again, for the remainder of this, we're focusing on the primary standard debit card that you're going to see from your regular bank. So with that, why would you potentially lean more towards Team Debit Card than Team Credit Card? Well, we kind of touched on it earlier in the key differences, right? The benefits or potential benefits here are going to be focused around, being able to just take money directly from your account versus the credit product and potentially getting into debt and things like that. So Team Debit Card usually says, hey, there is no chance of debt because you're taking the money out, directly from your account. You usually can't spend more than you have. That we'll talk about a way that you might be able to. There is no interest associated with it because it's not a credit product. There are no credit checks or no hard pulls to get it. Again, they come with checking accounts. It's free. There's no annual fee associated to a debit card or anything like that. Again, it's part of your checking account, product. You can earn some rewards points. We'll talk about those at the end. There are limited protections, which is somewhat of an improvement because there didn't used to be any protections, and we'll do an example at the end of this. So those are going to be your main pros, right? If you're someone who's like, hey, I'm not really good with someone who's going to give me a card with 10 grand on it, I know I'm going to spend 10 grand, not be able to pay it back, well, then you're probably going to be team debit card. That's okay. It's easier to just know who you are, know how you operate versus, taking the credit card anyways and getting in trouble with it. Now, what would team credit card say on the other hand? What are some downsides of going with the debit card? Well, here we have it. First of all, it's not a credit product, so it's not going to build credit, which, may or may not be an issue. It really just depends on where you're at in your credit journey. If you're, just starting out, then building credit, is going to be much more helpful. They're much weaker protections. Again, we'll take a look at an example right after this. They're ATM networks, so if you want to withdraw cash, again, sometimes you're kind of stuck in, it's a Chase card, you're kind of stuck with Chase ATMs, right? You can't necessarily get money out from other ATMs, or if you do, they're going to be high fees. And then they do have something called overdraft, right? So, normally, again, when we think of debit card, we think of, hey, you can't actually go into debt. You can't spend money that you don't have. Well, they have something called overdraft protection on debit cards where basically what they do is they go in and say, hey, look, if you make a purchase and the time purchase you don't have enough money in your account, the bank can float you the money. That way you can make your purchase, it doesn't get denied. However, there are usually a lot of fees associated with that. They're called overdraft fees. Now, just because you don't have the money in the account doesn't necessarily mean you don't have the money. It's entirely possible you just didn't move the money to the right account because, again, it's going to debit directly from that associated checking account versus a credit card that's pulling down from a line of credit. Generally, I just tell people to decline overdraft protection. Why bother? Why pay the extra fees? If you don't have the money, you probably shouldn't be buying it. And, if it's in the wrong account, you can quickly usually go and do a transfer over to the new account within seconds if it's, internal banks, like two Chase accounts, for example. But overall, those are going to be your primary pros and cons of each. Now, the big one here is, the protections and the security that a credit card can offer you over a debit card. Now, debit cards have come a long way. They usually not offer anything at all, but we have seen, some level of protections being added. So this is going to just be a quick comparison between two, but most of the time it actually comes down to the person issuing the debit cards, so Bank of America, Citi, Chase, those guys, and, the different types of protections they choose to offer. But this is kind of a generic example to help you think about it. So if we take protection examples, so the first one here, Fair Credit Billing Act, FCBA for short, this is going to cover credit cards. So we're talking about fraud here, so someone took your credit card, bought some stuff without you knowing. In the event of fraud, the most the cardholder will be responsible for is $50. Now, more often than not, the bank is simply going to waive that, not charge you anything. Versus debit cards in number 2, that's Electronic Funds Transfer Act, EFTA for short. It's covering your debit cards. In the event of fraud, a cardholder has 60 days to report it. So if lost or stolen reported before unauthorized transaction, zero liability. Lost or stolen card reported within 2 days, $50. Within 60 days, could be $500. And after 60 days, they're saying you're potentially, totally out of luck. Now, overall, again, it's kind of up to the issuer, right? So I wouldn't necessarily say it's a blanket assumption, of every single debit card, every single credit card out there. But, with the terms of credit cards, these banks have gotten so good at it because they want to keep people using credit cards and spending. So a lot of times, they're monitoring your account, right? To make sure, you don't have crazy purchases or unusual purchases. And they're kind of on top of it. And if it does happen, usually they're calling you. They will lock your account, wipe those charges out and just overnight you a new card. Now, they can absolutely do the same thing with debit cards. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. The primary difference here is even if you put those rules aside is, one, if someone takes your card and they're pulling from your line of credit, well, it's not technically your money they're taking. They're taking the bank's money, right? They have your debit card, they're taking your money out of your account. So if you have a smaller bank or something like that takes longer to move on this stuff or has a more in-depth process here, then that's money that's your money for other things, right? That might really mess up your budgeting. Back in the day, I've had credit card numbers stolen, in the past. It happens, but early on, they would, kind of lock your account, have you fill out some documentation, do a whole investigation. And again, if that's your personal checking account, having that frozen could be a big deal. So it's kind of another point on team credit card. Now, overall, the other big thing here is the rewards, right? We have to talk about it because that's what we're into. So, credit cards, you have a wide range of credit cards, from travel cards to hotel and airline cards to cashback cards, you name it, earning all sorts of multipliers anywhere. Well, you don't really see that with debit cards much. Now, the idea here is, again, you're buying things that you have to buy, so you might as well earn some rewards on it. And the thing, it would still hold true with debit cards as well. However, you just don't see nearly that many rewards earning options, on debit cards. Now, you do see some, so we'll take a look at some examples here. I pulled two decent ones. I would say that Discover is probably the most interesting one. It's going to get you 1x back on all purchases up to $3,000 a month. And Discover, of course, they do have checking and savings accounts as well. Now, Amex also has debit cards on the personal and business side of the house as well. Those get 1x back on every $2 spent, or, half a point per dollar spent, however you want to look at it. Bank of America also has some interesting debit card rewards where if you partner with the right checking account, they at least allow you to, use some, they call it partner rewards, basically. So you have some level of earnings there. So you can see right there, you're kind of coming up short the gate, and it just gets worse the farther up we go. Now, debit cards also don't usually have sign-up bonuses like credit cards do, but in fairness, checking accounts basically have the sign-up bonus, right? So you can, in fact, get a better sign-up bonus potential, an easier sign-up bonus with debit cards, because those sign-up bonuses tend not to require spend. They require, you depositing money into the account. So I will give that point to debit cards, even though it's more of a benefit of the checking account in a roundabout way there. So last thing I want to touch on is, why is this the case, right? Well, in my opinion, it's a few things here. First of all, banks are out to make money, and banks actually lose money when you use a debit card, believe it or not. So if you think about it, one, the interchange fees or the swipe fees are higher on credit cards than they are debit cards, right? So, that's the money that the payment network divides up between the issuer themselves, payment processor, and all that, right? So it's just less money. They charge less money when you use a debit card, so they're not making as much. Number two, there's a less chance for the consumer to accrue debt, in which debt is good for the bank because that means you're going to pay interest. So they lose out there as well. And number three is, when you're using a debit card and you're taking money directly out of your account, you could almost think about it like you're directly taking money out of the bank's pocket as well, because again, the bank is using your money that you have on deposit to lend to other people and make more money on. So across the board, debit cards are actually a losing transaction for the bank as a whole. Again, they want to give it to you so you can have easy access to your money, but you can see why they are much more fans of credit cards. So as a result, I think they've definitely tried to push folks towards credit cards more and more with the rewards earnings, with the points and things like that. So, overall, to close this one up here, I definitely think credit cards are the way to go. Now, yes, I do have debit cards. I keep them, because sometimes you do need to get cash, right? So don't go burning your debit cards. But, I would strongly consider going the credit card route because of the security, because of the protections, because of the rewards earnings. And again, if you think, hey, I'm someone who needs to build better credit habits, then you can always get a lower credit limit on your credit card until you learn, good habits. You can do things like set up auto pay, set up a ton of reminders, right? So that way, you don't miss those at least minimum payments. You can start joining the game. But of course, you always want to think about paying the thing in full, because there's no level of rewards that can actually outrun interest on your credit card. So anyways, guys, that's going to take a look at debit cards. So of course, if you like this one, drop me a thumbs up down below. If you found it particularly interesting, consider subscribing to the channel. Again, posting content just like this every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Of course, right back here every Sunday with all the news you can use in the week that was in credit and finance. My question for you guys is, let me know what you think about the resurgence of debit cards as of late. Would you like to see a little bit more variety and points earnings on debit cards, or are you just going to be ride or die credit card team? Love to hear your thoughts on that. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this one. As always, thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you very soon in the next one.